Hi, friends. Today is the day that we are going to talk about the favorites and least favorite books of 2019. Now, I would say that 2019 was a fantastic reading year for me. I, at the point of filming this, have read 120 books, and there were a lot of choices for favorite books of 2019. On the flip side, there were a few that were just downright crummy. And however, not that many, so that is good to know. So, without further ado, because I know that all of you have a ton of Vlogmas videos to catch up on, I don't want to make this an hour long. So, let's just get right into it. First, let's go with the least favorite books. Dun dun dun. In looking at my Goodreads challenge for this year, I could only really find three that I could say that I just like downright did not like. So here are the three books that I finished them, but I wish I hadn't because they were bad. First book was Rule of One by Ashley Saunders. Now, this one, I don't know that I would necessarily say it was bad. It just was not at all for me. And the ending, which I really don't remember what the ending was, but I remember thinking that it was really a letdown. That after all that we have gone through in this book, and it is a series, but I just felt like there was absolutely no plot, like a cliffhanger or anything, to propel me to want to read the next in the series. And this was a dystopian series. It was about a girl that was a twin, and in a world where twins were not allowed, and her father, their father, had been a high-ranking official, and he switched them back and forth depending on the day. And at one point, obviously, they get found out, and shit happens. So, I mean, the premise of it is really good. You would think that that would be exciting, but it went on too long, and I really don't remember what the conclusion of it was. Just don't remember. So I didn't like this one. I probably rated it like 2 stars. The second worst book that I read this year is the controversial one, and that would be Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I could not have cared less about any of the people in this book, and I honestly am really shocked that it is this popular in in the world we live in at this point, because everybody's always talking about, about the rich and how horrible they are, but then yet everybody wants to read about them. I don't really understand it. And like no one here was had any redeeming qualities except for, I thought, Astrid. I liked her character, but I didn't like the male protagonist in this. I thought he was deceitful. How do you get to that point in a relationship without divulging that, oh, by the way, my family has a butt ton of money? I probably would have been like, okay, that's great, thanks, but you might have wanted to tell me that before you threw me to the wolves, buddy. Yeah. So I just, no, I was just annoyed the entire way through this book. I finished it because I was hoping that there would be something in it that would make me like these characters. No, there was nothing. And the last one is one that I have ranted about on my channel. And that was, well, I probably ranted about all of these on my channel, let's be honest. But this one I think I really went off the deep end about. And that was Mary B. by Katherine J. Chen. And I read this book for Jane Austen July, and I was liking it. There were 3 parts in this book, and I liked it for the first part. I liked it because it was pretty much a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, just from the perspective of one of the sisters, Mary, who is kind of supposed to be like the unimpressive sister. That part was great. I liked it. By the end of this book, I was raging. They changed my favorite Pride and Prejudice. I mean, they changed Pride and Prejudice characters to be horrible, despicable human beings. And I just was like, what? Why? Why would you do such a thing? And they just completely changed personalities. Like, there were certain situations that I could see changing somebody's perspective on life. I get that, and kind of might be changing a marriage relationship, but there was literally no trying to resolve the conflict. They just stopped talking, and there was nothing. And then bad things happened, things that I do not agree with, and just made those characters horrible people in my eyes. And I was just like, nope, no, bad. So I sold that one right back to Half Price Books, and I will never recommend anybody ever read that unless you just want to be in this state of anger. Like I'm still getting in this state of anger. So those were the 3 worst books of my 2019. Can you see I really did not like them? Um, but now, let's talk about my favorite books and end this video on a happy note. Now, these 5 books are really not in any order except for number 1. The other 4, I loved them pretty much all the same. They all had different aspects about them that I loved, and I pretty much got 5 stars, 4 to 5 stars for me. So, yeah, that's the little disclaimer I'm putting in this. Number 5 on my list is Tilly and the Bookwanderers by Anna James. And this is book number 1 in the Pages & Co. series, which I believe is going to have a number of books in it. I'm not really positive on that, but if anybody knows, let me know. I know that the next one, I think, is supposed to come out this year. Oh, no, it already came out. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the paperback because I ended up getting the paperback, which I don't have with me right now because everything you can't see is a mess. So, but anyway, yes, Tilly and the Bookwanderers. If you have been a lover of books since you were a child, you will just love this little book. I mean, it's not a little book, it's fairly chunky, but it's middle grade, and it's magical. It talks about a love of classic literature, and it's set in a magical type bookshop in England, and it follows a little girl named Tilly and her friends, and she finds that she can see and interact with book characters, such as Anne of Green Gables and Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, and her grandmother can do the same, and her grandfather can do the same as well. And those are the people that she lives with, which adds just a little bit of extra fairy tale touch whenever a character lives with her grandparents, I think. So yeah, it was just such a cute middle grade story, and I'm really glad. I had a little bit of a saga trying to get a copy of this book, but once I finally got it, it did not disappoint. I loved it so much. The next book I put on my list was actually kind of a surprise. It's a nonfiction book, and that is How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman. I've just found this book so readable and so enjoyable. It came in for me, nonfiction November, right after Victober. And I absolutely love Victober every year. So I just wanted to keep the good vibes going. And when I picked this book up, I just felt like Ruth Goodman was just like a friend telling me how things worked in Victorian times. And I found it really fascinating that she has kind of lived as a Victorian. She lived on a farm and did a BBC series for about living on a Victorian farm. So she actually has practiced living the way she shows, in these books. So it's not just her spouting off a bunch of research. I mean, her research was firsthand, basically. So yeah, it was just really interesting, and I feel like it's the type of book that you could just dip in and out of depending on what aspect of Victorian culture you were interested in learning about. But the book itself goes from first thing in the morning when a Victorian would wake up to the time that they go to bed at night. And then they just have different aspects of Victorian culture woven in throughout the day. And I just thought that this was a wonderful way to write a book, especially something like this that just is kind of how a Victorian would live. It was very well thought out, easy to read, and gave a lot of good information. And now, when I read a Victorian novel and something comes up about some a day-to-day task that a Victorian would do, and that author is not really thinking that they have to explain why their character's doing that because they're writing in that time period and they know nothing different. Now I kind of have a context for it, and it's really great. So yeah, I loved this nonfiction work. I wanted in my next book choice to put one of the books that I read for the read along of the Betsy Tacy Deep Valley series on this list. And because I enjoyed this whole series so much this year, and reading it with Kelly and Kate and Katie for the whole year. And yeah, I just enjoyed it so much. So I wanted to make sure that at least one of these books got on this list. And the one I decided to go with was actually not one of the Betsy Tacy books. It was actually Emily of Deep Valley by Maud Hart Lovelace. And the reason that I chose Emily of Deep Valley is because it just seemed to have a lot more depth to it than most of the other Deep Valley books that I'd read. The rest of them, they were adorable and I love them and I will keep going back to them. They are a comfort read for me for sure now. Even though it was my first time reading them, I will definitely be going back to them in the future. But all of the rest of them kind of had a tone and a class of character, and everyone was kind of the same. And it did follow the same characters throughout, so I mean that makes sense. However, in Emily of Deep Valley, we get a character that is based on a real life person that Maud Hart Lovelace knew, but she wasn't one of the crowd, really. And she was also different in the class system than the rest of the girls would have been. She was an orphan. She took care of her grandfather. She did not go to college like the other girls did. And it was just really intriguing how Maud Hart Lovelace really delved into her character and showed that, you can get satisfaction from your life even if your life doesn't look like everybody else's. Number 4 that I chose for this year was A Man Called Uwe by Fredrik Backman. There's always some kind of, back and forth about how to say that name. But, yeah, A Man Called Uwe is actually my first Fredrik Backman, and I have yet to read another Fredrik Backman, but I plan to in January. I plan to finally get to Beartown. And I loved A Man Called Ove. It was so heartwarming and funny and sad, all the things. And I totally agree, just based off of one book, with what everybody says about Fredrik Backman and how just awesome he is and how impressive that his works, his writing even comes across as so brilliant in translation. Last, but certainly not least, my absolute favorite book of 2019 was Sweep, The Story of a Girl and Her Monster by Jonathan Auxier. And I'm sure that you are all really, really shocked if you've been around my channel for any length of time. I pretty much talk about this book nonstop. I recommend it to everyone, whether you are a middle grade reader or not. I just think you should read this book. It was the group read for middle grade March this year, and I'm pretty sure that it blew everybody's socks off, and as it should have. It tells the story of a girl named Nan who is a chimney sweep in Victorian London, and that is unusual because most of the chimney sweeps were boys. And I didn't know how chimney sweeping worked back in Victorian times before there was any kind of reform in the labor laws, and they would actually send these small boys up into the tiny little chimneys to clean them out, and they would often get stuck, and there were ways of trying to get them out of there that were absolutely horrific. And this kind of thing happens to Nan, but she does not die, and whenever she wakes up, she finds a golem beside her, which is a Jewish folklore type of a thing that is supposed to protect a person. So this golem, who she names Charlie, is there to protect her, and they get into all sorts of things. And I don't know if anybody out there was a big fan of the Disney movie, now turned Broadway play, The Newsies, but I got serious Newsies vibes from this book. And I even found myself singing at the end, because there is like a reform kind of thing, and I would sing in my head, "Seize the Day." I was singing Newsies songs to myself during reading this book, because it just gave me such nostalgic vibes for something that is really close to my heart, and that even though I had never read this book before, it just gave me all those feels of nostalgia for watching that movie and seeing the musical. So that's how you know I'm a theater geek. Whenever I can relate any book back to a musical I've seen. So, but anyway, I would totally recommend Sweep to anyone. And one of my ultimate goals for 2020 is to read as much of Jonathan Auxier's books as possible, because if he wrote one book like that, which I realize like all books are going to be different, but his writing was so beautiful that I can't imagine that his other books wouldn't be just as good. So I plan to get to his book Peter Nimble and His Fantastic Eyes next year, and I'm really excited to read something else by Jonathan Auxier because I just loved Sweep so much. So there you have it. There are my 5 best books of 2019 and my 3 least favorite books of 2019. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be back tomorrow for something. I'm not really sure. I don't have anything pre-planned, so we'll see. All right, friends. I'll talk to you later. Bye.